Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, members of the media, the listening public, and happy to also be here with my colleague, the Minister for Youth and Sports, Senator Owen Darrell, and also Member of Parliament Kim Swan. Today, I am pleased to share information on the Ministry of Home Affairs plans and initiatives for the year 23-24 budget year. For the fiscal year 23-24, the Ministry of Home Affairs has received an estimated budget allocation of $18,376,000, which is $401,000 or 2% less than the last fiscal year of 22-23. The ministry's budget includes the following departments: Ministry Headquarters, Registry General, Department of Planning, Land Valuation, Environment and Natural Resources, Energy, Land, Title, and Registration. This year, significant attention by the Ministry of Home Affairs will be focused on projects primarily delivered through the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Related to the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, commonly known as DENR, they are responsible for managing and regulating fisheries, marine conservation, marine heritage, terrestrial conservation, and nature reserve management, pollution control, agriculture, animal and plant management, and the Bermuda Aquarium, Museum, and Zoo. This year, DENR will continue to focus its efforts on protecting our environment, increasing local food production, and assisting the industry in reducing local production costs, which will translate into increased food security and reducing cost of living for our residents. DENR and the Board of Agriculture have developed and will implement, along with the ministry, an integrated agricultural strategy that includes renewing the National Crop Strategy 2016 to 2021, the Draft Dairy Strategy, and completing new livestock, poultry, honey, and aquaculture components. I would like to mention that integrated agricultural strategy will be done in cooperation with the Ministry of Economy and Labor. DENR will also update the Agricultural Act of 1930 and its attending regulations, including registering farmers to help prevent the selling of crop stolen from our hardworking farmers. This is a serious problem, unfortunately, and it's taking food not only out of the mouths of our farmers, but also out of the mouths of hardworking Bermudians who are struggling with high food costs. We will also provide direct support to farmers via a highly experienced consultant agronomist who, supported by a local trainee, will prioritize addressing the sector's needs. The individual will have specialized expertise in critical issues such as soil management, pest and disease surveillance, procurement of seeds and supplies, and developing a trial variety program. DENR will also assist farmers by implementing measures to reduce the commonly known term, nighttime farming of crops through better surveillance of fields and improved enforcement measures. Concerning protecting our environment, traditionally the department engaged several local entities to undertake specialized studies, especially the ambient air and air quality, the Amphibian Research Project, and the Society for the Prevention of the Cruelty to Animals, also known as the SPCA. I am pleased to advise that funding for ambient air water quality monitoring program, the Amphibian program, and the SPCA have been reinstated. The SPCA grant for $30,000 will assist with the delivery of their programs to help the Department of Environment and Natural Resources manage the increasing population of dogs and the problems that have become associated with that. A grant of $15,000 will continue the effort towards identifying persistent organic pollutants impacting our ponds and other parts of the environment, also to ensure that Denner can meet its monitoring requirements under the Clean Air Act 1991 and Water Resources Act of 1975. Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, BIOS, will receive a grant in the amount of $230,000. Over the next fiscal year, the Department of the Environment and Natural Resources will be on achieving will focus on achieving these objectives. However, it is important to note that ongoing initiatives of critical importance will include the following: introducing legislation towards the elimination of single-use plastics, creation of a marine development plan, and introducing an energy regulator sandbox and green energy environment justice fund. I assure every Bermudian that we will continue to seek opportunities that positively impact the future well-being of our country and guide us on to a clear path of economic growth. And I will provide a fulsome report on the ministry's budgetary plans during the budget debate of the House of Assembly. Thank you very much, and I will take any questions at this time.
Afternoon, Minister, and thanks for having us. I guess, can you tell us any more to start with about the agronomist that you mentioned, who that would be and where they're coming to us from?
I cannot remember the gentleman's name at this time. I will happily provide that to you, but he's a gentleman who's actually been working in Bermuda before. He is a quite a known expert in the region on this field. He actually worked in the Bahamas and across the Caribbean in this area of agronomy, and is returning to Bermuda to support these programs that we have outlined, and has actually previously worked here in Bermuda with the department and with the farmers on similar programs.
Got you. In the budget statement, there was, and you touched on it, there was some reference to reintroduction of air quality monitoring for people affected by the Belco emissions. I guess, could you expand on that? Because there's two different areas. You mentioned the ambient air quality monitoring, which is, I believe, a separate program run by BIOS. But in terms of specifically on the Belco air monitoring, just, I guess, what's involved? Are there new monitoring stations?
All right, thank you for that question. It's one we've answered before, but I'm happy to answer.
Okay.
Again, it's all right. There are two separate components to this. First of all, monitoring quality air quality monitoring at Belco does go on. It goes on under their license of the Clean Air Act, and so monitoring goes on. What we are doing is setting up additional stations. One, there was an independent station that was set up previously at a local residence, and we are going to reestablish that. Also, there is independent evaluation of that monitoring that's done by Belco of the findings of which this will help to fund. The other piece, of course, is the monitoring that's done in other parts of the island, particularly that monitors Tynes Bay and other areas where we do have industrial facilities that do have emissions. And so that is a separate part. And of course, BIOS's role is to independently assess that monitoring for us. And also with the emissions that come from vehicles down at East Broadway as well,
yeah.
That's also going to be reinstituted with the support of this funding, which is what actually was withdrawn the previous year. But I just want to remind people that monitoring of Belco's emissions does continue. We do get reports of which are evaluated, and that is done by the environmental authority of their emissions on a regular basis.
I mean, wouldn't that be kind of an admission that the monitoring station shouldn't have been shut down in the first place? Was it strictly budgetary that the program was shut down?
No, part of it was, but at no time was the monitoring of Belco shut down because of budgetary requirements. The monitoring, the other south station that was monitored by Belco was actually one that had to be moved because it was on a private property, and the private landowner did not want the monitoring station on that site. So we have to move that. What was being paid for with Belco's monitoring was the independent assessment of the monitoring, not so much the monitoring itself. Belco continues to be assessed. The monitoring that was stopped and the process around that was stopped previously was the independent assessment and some of the monitoring activities of BIOS. That will resume, right? So we will have the independent assessment of Belco's monitoring supported with the assistance of BIOS, and we will resume the other emissions monitoring, but at Tynes Bay and also down at East Broadway. So this money will, by and large, support the reinstitution of that monitoring and its independent assessment.
And just so I'm totally clear on it, the monitoring like we had by East Broadway, that was just dropped for a year because of budgetary reasons?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Moving on. Yeah, your colleague, Minister Hayward, was very critical in the House about Belco's soot fallouts and said he had approached you about the issue. I guess what can you tell us that on your ministry and you're doing to address that ongoing soot issue with Belco around there?
Thank you for raising the question. I'm happy to repeat again. The monitoring, well, the actual emissions from, and when I say emissions, the actual soot emissions and the particulates that people are finding on their roofs, that is unacceptable. It is an abomination that the residents in that area have to suffer through those constant emissions, I'll call it that for now, from the utility as a result of the, what goes on at the plant. And they shouldn't have to suffer that any further. And it's coming from what is supposed to be a brand new plant. With that said, we have, and I've even personally gone over there and gone with the residents, looked at their roofs and looked at and seen what they are experiencing. So I'm aware of what's happening. Some time ago, not just because of Belco, but just because we realized that due to the wider understanding and sensitivities around the environment, that our clean air framework needed to be updated. So we're doing that. And that will be one of the lines of response that we are going to put in place to deal with the issues that are being faced by those residents and other people around the island, because air quality is crucial to good health and quality of life. And those changes will be tougher, the standards will be higher, and there could be penalties attached with certain types of disruptive emissions that don't meet the quality standard. So we're in the process of doing that. It's a very technical and detailed process. It's not straightforward of just changing a few lines in the law, but because we want the standards to be clear, and certainly this will also mean changes to the license that Belco has, because like any other control plant, Belco has to be licensed to operate, and there are conditions to their license. And we will ensure that whatever the changes that are made, and we are working on them now, will reflect the concern around the issue and the actions that need to be taken to improve the situation. This is a problem that Belco needs to fix. It is their plant, and they need to do more of what they can possibly do to relieve the residents of the stress, the fear, and anxiety that they are experiencing.
And the changes that you mentioned, are we looking at that happening in this current legislative
We are
year?
working to have them happen within this legislative calendar year. And we're working on them now. It's one of my pieces of legislation that I am actively dealing with as we speak on my legislative agenda.
Okay, moving on. With the Southampton Princess, we've seen some plans for the development up there. Can you tell us when you expect those plans to be submitted? And will it be through a normal planning process, or is it going to be a special development order?
I cannot tell you what the developers, the private developers of the hotel are going to do with their plans. Those are questions better left to them. But what I can say is that they will have to follow the planning law. The legislation itself says that. They will also, if they desire to make a application at some future time for a special development order, there is a clear legislative process to doing that. I believe they may have started some of that process recently with some public consultation. That is all a part of the process that they have to engage in. And so they will be required to follow the law and follow the regulations as they are clearly outlined. And that means an environmental impact assessment that will be publicly disclosed. That will be a very public consultation process. And I will be required myself, if at some point in time there is an application for an SDO, I will myself have to be very public about that process. So it's all very clearly outlined in the law.
Gotcha.
But I await, like everybody else, to see what the developers will present. They are in consultation and have been in consultation with planning to get advice on the steps they need to take. And that's not a process I'm involved with. That is dealt with at a technical level. And we all await to see what will eventually be brought forward.
I wanted to ask you, just as Minister of the Environment, what you make of the plan, just with the amount of, it looks like a lot of green land is being built up on there.
I have not seen anything definitive. Anybody can have plans and ideas and proposals, but ultimately they have to go through a proper scrutiny. So until I see, as the minister in the process of which governs what I do, what the developer wishes to do, that's when I'll give an opinion. I don't wish to presume anything about the development at this point, other than we all welcome the redevelopment of the Fairmont. And I look forward to it just like everybody else in this country does. It is very important to our tourism. It's very important to the economic welfare of the country. So I look forward to doing whatever this government can do to ensure that that happens. There are other pieces of it which will obviously have to go through the proper scrutiny, but certainly the redevelopment of Fairmont is something that we all welcome.
Just a few more, sir. So we've seen that the Development Applications Board, when it's a retroactive application that goes before them, I believe they automatically have to refuse it, and then it goes through an appeal. Is there any thought on changing that system just to make it more nimble? This came up with the Mr. Thomas's development in St. George's.
So are you suggesting that we allow people to make retroactive applications after they've already violated the planning law and make that more nimble for them to get away with it?
Well, if it's automatic, I mean, is there any thought that the DAB can just have more discretion of its own, I guess?
I would think that most people would want, if somebody goes ahead and does something, and I'm not speaking about Mr. Thomas, I'm talking about generally
Yeah.
about planning applications. If somebody goes ahead and does something that is contrary to the plans that they have already had permission for, I would think that most people would want some due diligence and some process of checking to make sure that no continuous violations are tolerated. Because if people are allowed to violate the planning law, that means that they don't have regard for some of the sensitivities that go along with development in a very land sensitive, limited land community. So I think we all would want to know that there's a check and balance for anybody who doesn't follow a plan that has been approved and they do a development contrary to what has already been approved by them. I think that most people would want to have a check and balance in that. And yes, the board certainly has to refuse it, but then ultimately, and that is because people shouldn't believe that they can, I guess, what is the saying? Ask for permission. No, it is easier to seek forgiveness than ask permission. And I think that we all know that that's not an acceptable principle to follow by.
Jonathan, we do have other members of the media who would like to ask questions, and we do have another minister that has to give his briefing. So if we can wind this down so that we can afford.
I'll just do a last one.
Thank
Is there any update on the Ocean Prosperity Plan? The fishermen weren't happy about it, but I guess any update you can give on that.
Thank you for that question. We are currently in a process of discussion with the FAB, the Fishermen's Association of Bermuda. And when there is something to announce publicly, we both will, I'm sure, make that available. But at the moment, we are in discussions about the process going forward,
Right.
as we agreed to on the 13th of January.
Thanks. Cheers.
Good afternoon, Minister.
Good afternoon.
Just wanted to touch back on the Balco situation, the soot emissions. Minister Hayward actually called in the House for residents to be compensated or have their bills, well, essentially free electricity for those people affected. Would you support some sort of compensation in that way?
I think that's a regulatory matter between the regulator and the licensed utility and the residents. I, as the energy minister, don't have any comment on that, but clearly what Minister Hayward was trying to express is the, I guess, feeling of the residents and perhaps how some relief might be able to give to them for the situation they're experiencing. But I will leave any decisions up to that to the regulator, the utility, and the residents. I have no opinion on that at all at this point.
You know, they have expressed a lot of frustration. It's been a long situation that's been ongoing, but broadly, would the government consider stepping in and compensating them in some way, whether that be financial or just a show of support for them?
I think I've made it clear, the energy sector is regulated. The government doesn't have the capacity legally to do that unless the law allows us to do that. There may be remedies that those residents can get through other ways by working through the regulatory process with the RA and certainly with discussions with Belco. There may be other ways, but at this point, I think that is the most efficient way for them to deal with it. The regulator has a duty to provide consumer protection initiative, and they have a consumer protection mandate. So certainly, if the residents felt that there was a case for some form of compensation, they could approach the regulator to do that, who actually polices the area. And certainly, there may be some other remedies in other areas that they may be able to seek some sort of redress where compensation could be given. But I have no knowledge of that, and I wouldn't presume to commit anyone to what could be done in there. I am sensitive to the issues around there. As I said, I've gone to these houses and seen what they're experiencing, and it's intolerable. But there may be other remedies other than government coming out with money, which I don't even believe that the government can legally do at this point. But certainly, there is a regulator who can be approached for a possible steps on which they can seek some redress from the utility because the utility is licensed to operate under a regulatory framework.
Thank you for that clarification. Moving to the consultant that will be hired to deal with agricultural matters, I wondered, had there been any, had the government looked internally in Bermuda for any experts that could have lent assistance?
Yes, there is no qualified agronomist in Bermuda. There's no Bermudian who's qualified with the specialties in that area. I assure you, if there was, I would already have been working with them. We give considerable amount of support to the farmers, and it's actually the farmers themselves who have made this request of us for a considerable amount of time because they have worked with an agronomist in the past. They found the benefits to having that sort of advice available to them. So they have been actually asking for many years for this very level, this high level expertise to be made available to them. So they welcome the fact that we have invited this gentleman back to Bermuda who has done all this work to work with them. So yes, we have looked inside. There is no one in Bermuda qualified at this level. And so we have brought in somebody who we know that the farmers will be appreciative of, who can help them do some things that they wish to do in the space of their industry.
Sure. Are you able to share the cost of that consultant?
I will deal with that in the budget, and I will be able to disclose the cost related to that at that time.
Okay, thank you. So as we know, fishermen, they will have their payroll tax liability reduced to zero this coming year. I wondered if you had heard any feedback, any support if that move.
I've not heard anything directly, but I believe that they will welcome that. It's a bit of relief that we felt that we could give to those two very core industries, which are not the highest sort of profitable industries. And we know that, as I've already communicated, that our farmers have great challenges, not only with the issues of night farming, but with just managing through a tough environment with working. And certainly our like fishermen have similar issues with, the seas are not always calm and peaceful where they can go out and fish. So, but they are every day, like many businesses, required to meet certain obligations. So the government has made the step, of which we welcome in our department, that can give them a little bit of relief as they continue to try and make their industry work for themselves. So I will continue to do whatever I can support fishermen and farmers with their industry. And that's why many of the things that we've announced in the budget is to help these industries and them to be able just to do what they want to do.
Thank you. And just lastly, a reduction of $401,000 this year. Are there any areas that will, I don't want to say be neglected, but will be missing out on those funds?
No, I think that primarily has to do with the fact that there was a Department of Consumer Affairs that was under our ministry, which has now been moved to, primarily most of that has to do with the moving of a department to the Attorney General and Ministry of Justice. That primarily is most of why that funding is not there. So there are no other areas that are going to be overly neglected by that. We have done a good job over the years of meeting our targets as have been outlined to us, and I would say overproducing as a ministry. So we will take our budget and do what we have to do.
Sure. And sorry, this is my last question, I promise. The Northeast Hamilton plan, do we have any updates on that project?
No, right. That's already been deployed at this time. The components of its deployment as a plan, because I do believe now it's operative, for one. Two, the deployment of that plan being operative is primarily with the Ministry of Economy and Labor under the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, because the funding and support for any developments in Northeast Hamilton come through them. We merely are administrating the planning side of it, ensuring that whatever is operative is met from a planning standpoint. Its actual ability for anybody to take advantage of what is the overall plan, it comes through the Ministry of Economy and Labor and through the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation.
As a follow-up, any plans in that area that have been submitted?
I cannot advise at this point if there are any, but we welcome, because there are, we welcome any development that will bring about improvement in Northeast Hamilton. I do know that a number of persons in the area have expressed interest with doing things, but whether there's been any official plans submitted, I cannot say at this point.
Thank you, Minister.
No. Okay. Thank you very much, members of the media. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, everyone. I would now like to invite my colleague, the Minister for Youth and Sport, Culture and Sport, the Honorable Senator Owen Darrell, to the podium.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Good afternoon, everyone. The Ministry of Youth, Culture, and Sport continues to be proud of its role in our community. Since becoming the minister last year, I have been extremely heartened by the enthusiasm and dedication from the team in the ministry who work tirelessly to ensure that our culture and heritage is preserved, and that our young people are nurtured, and that our next generation of elite athletes are supported. Our ministry remains committed to ensuring that it continues to focus on supporting these critical programs which contribute to the enrichment and betterment of our people. Our budget allocations are designed to progress the pledges that we made in the government's throne speech. With that, I wish to provide a brief overview of some of the areas my ministry will focus on in this upcoming fiscal year. The Ministry of Youth, Culture, and Sports budget for this year is $13,718,000, which represents an increase of 7% over last year's budget, or $849,000. There will be an opportunity to go into depth regarding specific and detailed allocations during the budget debate, which gets underway next week. But we wanted to share some of our programs focused this year, which are follows. The Bermuda government, through the Department of Youth, Sport, and Recreation, values the importance of sport in Bermuda, as well as nurturing the development of our young people. To this end, I am excited to announce that during this upcoming fiscal year, we will provide additional support to high-performing as well as elite athletes to ensure that our athletes continue to dominate on the world stage, proving that a small population can create world-class athletes. As it relates to our national sports governing bodies, we will continue working with their leadership in the development of the long-term athletic development plans. Our objective in this regard is to educate those national sports governing bodies about the importance of the long-term athletic development, to further develop and enhance those NSGBs already familiar with these principles, and to encourage organizations to think analytically about their sport and how it can be improved. We have increased funding for our very popular summer day camp and after-school programs. This will help in increasing a number of available spots for our young people. The Department of Youth, Sport, and Recreation is also providing investment grants this year to assist young persons who wish to pursue their recreational passions in areas including arts, oration, culinary arts, science, technology, engineering, and math. Turning to the Department of Culture, our signature programs include the Bermuda Day Parade, the Gombe Festival, as well as National Heroes celebrations. Today, I am pleased to use this opportunity to formally announce that this year's Heritage Month theme is a Bermudian Renaissance. We chose this theme because we recognize that Bermudians have always had to be resourceful. Even though we hail from a small, isolated island, we have always found inventive ways to redefine who we are. Our artists redefine what it means to Bermudian in public art, in spoken word, in music, and in dance. This Heritage Month, we look with a renewed interest at the talents and identities that continue to shape and evolve our national identity. The Department of Culture will also be creating the second part of a short film series, Gold Bermudians, that highlight the accomplishments of Bermudians who have punched above their weight on the international stage. The first set of films to be premiered at the end of the month will feature stories of Earl Cameron, Lance Hayward, Keturah Horton Parent Chief, Michael Frith, and Clarence Hill. The department is also providing a series of workshops under the banner of our Cultural Lab series, empowering creatives to further hone their craft and the way they present themselves when auditioning. And we are also partnering with the Ministry of Education to provide tradition bearers in the schools. This program supports a master artisan who offers workshops to primary and/or middle school students on how to create and build uniquely Bermudian items, structures, art pieces. Currently, Mr. Milton Hill is working with a group of students at Whitney and Clearwater Middle Schools to construct a traditional wooded fitted dinghy. So far, the feedback has been very encouraging, and we are stepping up our plans to expand this signature program. In closing, the ministry intends to continue to develop and celebrate our people through a variety of cultural, creative, and youth-focused initiatives. We will continue to dedicate our efforts to sports development by supporting elite athletes, our national sports governing bodies, as well as youth organizations. Thank you.
Right, members of the media, we're going to start with Mr. Earl Basin from Island Stats.
Good afternoon, Minister.
Sir.
I'm glad to hear that the elite athletes will have funding. But there's a concern that at the youth level where we develop athletes to get to the elite status is lacking funding. How do we plan to address that part?
You will see in our budget debates, Mr. Basin, that there is significant funding that has been allocated to the Department of Youth, Sport, and Recreation, to the long-term athletic development program, which will go directly to youth programs.
Okay. Talk a little bit about this past year and our athletes and what the government thinks about where sports is heading in this country.
Actually, since the time that I've been in here, in this role as ministry, I think we've had some very positive sporting events that have taken place. You would have seen in probably the first week that I came in October, we had a very successful Crifter triathlon that was here in Bermuda. We had in January the Elite Mile, which was won by one of our elite athletes, Mr. D.H. Minus, and I'm sure he and others will be happy to hear about this commitment to the elite athletes of this island. As you may or may not know, the Bermuda cricket team is currently in Argentina, and they are getting ready to prepare for a series of matches to qualify for the next stage of going to the T20 World Cup, and that actually starts on Saturday. The Bermuda Football Association is getting ready to take a match against, I think, Guyana in March. So there are quite a bit of initiatives that are going on, and this ministry is happy to support those organizations, national sports governing bodies, which I met with yesterday, to reiterate this government's support for sport on this island at all levels.
One of the main topics in sport is the upgrading of the National Sports Center.
Absolutely.
Where are we? I'm not talking about the energy plant because we would all see that's happening right now. There's an issue, obviously, with lighting that the Bermuda Football Association have to play their match at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because lighting on the main stadium is inadequate. So can we get an update on that?
Well, I know you said you did not want to connect the two, but the reason why the lighting is unavailable is because the changing of the light bulbs at the Flora Duffy Stadium is directly related to the upgrade of the energy. So there has to be a sufficient time for gentlemen to climb, I don't know how many feet in the air to change light bulbs. And those light bulbs are being changed from the regular light bulbs that we've had for years to LED light bulbs. And unfortunately, with this scheduling of the football match, I'm not going to turn on a stadium with half regular lights and half LED lights because I don't think FIFA would actually approve the pitch for play. So they are connected, and that is the reason why we're going to have a day match on this one-off instance.
And last about the lighting, the North Field.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we in posting the 4 that were destroyed in the storm some years ago, but have not been erected?
I will have to take that question back to the Board of Trustees of the National Sports Center, and when I have the answer, I will furnish it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basin. Thank you for your questions. Jasmine, do you have any questions for the minister at all? One or two?
Hi, Minister. Just the one question. You mentioned some renewed investment into summer day camps and programs. I wondered if you could expand a bit on that.
You would recall that I think I gave a ministerial statement a few months ago that we were able to find in this current budget some additional funds that we were able to direct to summer day camp and after school programs. And that was as a result of just where we are economically in the country. And what the department has looked at is that we have a very lengthy wait list for individuals to get to summer day camp and to get to after school programs, which, as you know, has a direct effect sometimes on social behaviors. So all this is a continuation of what we put in as a temporary fix for this current budget, and we're reallocating some funds so that we can continue that level of service going forward for 23-24. So what we didn't want to do is increase levels from January to April, and then after April say, oh, we've got to go back to pre-budget levels of capacity. So it's just a continuation of what we announced a few months ago.
Okay, thank you. And that wait list, around how many numbers are you looking at?
The wait list, I think when I made that statement previously, was about 91, and it has reduced significantly since we've made this investment.
Any view to offer sort of free vouchers or for parents who are looking to get their kids into after school programs?
I believe that there are free vouchers that are already offered through other departments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Jonathan, did you have any questions at all for the Minister of Sports? Nothing to do with culture at all? Nothing? All right, very good. Well, I believe that concludes today's press briefing. Thank you very much, members of the media, for your participation, and thank you, ministers, for your fulsome updates. Thank you.